Ya, pasca 52% warga Inggris memilih Brexit dalam referendum Inggris pada tanggal 23 Juni lalu, situasi politik dan ekonomi dalam negeri Inggris pun mulai terguncang. Nilai tukar mata uang pound sterling jatuh ke level terendah sejak tahun 1985. Meski masih memiliki waktu 2 tahun pada masa transisi, 27 negara Uni Eropa lainnya seolah bergegas menyiapkan masa depan Uni Eropa tanpa Inggris. Nah, apa saja dampak sepeninggal Inggris bagi Uni Eropa dan sejauh mana ancaman Brexit terhadap persatuan Uni Eropa ke depan? Kita akan bahas dalam Insight kali ini bersama saya, Desi Anwar. Ya, keputusan Inggris keluar dari Uni Eropa memicu reaksi dari para pemimpin Uni Eropa. Sebagian menyesalkan keputusan ini, namun ada juga yang meminta Inggris untuk segera keluar dari Uni Eropa secara resmi.
Kanselir Jerman Angela Merkel menyayangkan keputusan Inggris. Menurutnya Uni Eropa tidak perlu buru-buru menarik kesimpulan. Penyesalan juga disampaikan Presiden Prancis François Hollande. Hollande menyatakan keluarnya Inggris memberi ujian baru bagi Uni Eropa. Sementara itu Perdana Menteri Belanda Mark Rutte mengatakan keluarnya Inggris menjadi pelajaran bagi Uni Eropa untuk mengontrol pertumbuhan ekonomi dan perbatasan eksternal Uni Eropa. Selanjutnya Menteri Luar Negeri Italia Paolo Gentiloni menyatakan Uni Eropa harus membuat kebijakan umum untuk menjaga pertumbuhan ekonomi, migrasi, dan pertahanan. Kanselir Austria Christian Kern menyatakan Brussel membutuhkan proses reformasi yang jelas untuk meningkatkan perekonomian. Sementara itu Presiden Uni Eropa Jean-Claude Juncker justru menginginkan agar Inggris segera keluar dari Uni Eropa dengan mempercepat negosiasi sebelum bulan Oktober. Grafiardi Kresnantio, CNN Indonesia.
Ya, bagaimana negara-negara di Uni Eropa mengantisipasi dampak pisahnya Inggris dari Uni Eropa? Kita akan berbincang dengan Vincent Guérin, Duta Besar Uni Eropa untuk Indonesia. Vincent, so good to see you. Enchanté.
Nice to see you, Desi. My pleasure.
So, something very historic, unprecedented has just happened to the United Kingdom, to Britain, and also to the whole of the European Union and the project of the European Union itself. So, what next? Say, for example, for the first time in the European Union's history, a very significant member of the Union suddenly decides to just get up and go and bye-bye Europe.
Well, as you said, that's unprecedented. For years and years, decades and decades, the EU has been enlarging in different waves, and the UK was part of the first enlargement wave in 1973. And now, for the first time, we have one member state, the UK, deciding to leave. But as a matter of fact, we have no decision yet. That's the particular situation we're in. We have a vote, very significant, clear vote from the British people, but which has the legal status of an opinion, and it's now for the British Parliament, for the British government to translate this opinion to a decision. So far from the EU side, we are certainly saddened by this vote.
Be honest, what was your reaction when suddenly it was the vote was very obviously on the Brexit side? Were you yourself very shocked? I mean, did you anticipate that this might happen?
Well, yes, we knew that the chance for the Remain as for the exit camp were more or less equal, that it would be a very narrow outcome. We had feared, indeed, an exit majority, and sadly, indeed, it was an exit majority by more than 1 million voters. But it was a shock nevertheless, because, as you said, it's a historical watershed. And this is something which is not completely uncharted, because we have this Article 50 of the treaty, which
has never actually been implemented. Okay, let's go back a little bit about what is this Article 50 and how does it work? And who should, once you decide to leave, who should start saying, okay, let's start the leaving procedure, or can the other party says, okay, let's wait till whether they're actually leaving or not? I mean, how does it actually work on the legal basis?
Good question, because the article is new, as you said, never was implemented, and new because it's only since 2009, the entry into force of the last treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, which that the article exists. So the procedure is quite simple. One member state may decide, according to its own constitutional procedure, to invoke the article and decide to leave. Then it has to make a request, a formal one. And once this request is tabled, there is 2 years, a time frame of 2 years, where this member state and the rest of the EU have to negotiate a new agreement, international agreement, organizing the relationship between this country, which will no longer be a member state of the EU, and the rest. 2 years. And if after 2 years no agreement is found, then this country is like any third country, like Indonesia, like Brazil, like any other one. So it's quite serious indeed. And now we are at the stage where we're waiting for formal decision notification by the British government.
So the UK has to give a formal notification. Like, for example, you want to resign, so you have to put in the letter, and then afterwards you start negotiating. But can the UK, for example, negotiate before invoking so that they can make sure that they know what's going on or what they can actually negotiate for?
Well, precisely yes and no. Precisely yes, we're in this situation where we have a clear expression by the British people, but we have no notification by the British government. But we, from the EU side, have said clearly at all levels, the highest level, that there should be now no prior negotiation. We had a prior agreement already.
No phone calls saying, let's do this and let's do that, and
well, maybe
no lobbying.
Phone calls and discussions, but we're talking about something like 80,000 pages of what we call the acquis, I mean, all the acquisition of legal procedure, legal law in the EU. So it's something which is enormous. And so now we said quite clearly, you had a chance back in February. There was an agreement to organize the condition under which the EU may retain the UK as a full member with a specific status. The British bill has decided against. So now there's no new negotiation now. It's about negotiating something completely legal, a legal framework under this Article 50. So no prior negotiation. Because if we do a prior negotiation, then it will just postpone again the hesitation of British people whether to stay or not.
It will just lengthen the uncertainty.
Yes.
But then once the Article 50 is invoked, there's a 2-year period in which negotiations needs to be done. Okay?
Correct.
But what if it takes longer?
Well, if it takes longer, indeed, the Council may decide to prolong exceptionally this period. So this provision is also in this famous Article 50. But this would be an exception to be decided by unanimity. Whereas for the normal proceeding is what we call the majority, qualified majority of the member states. So the, let's say, normal path is 2 years.
So, but in any case, after invoking Article 50, after 2 years, the UK status is definitely out of the European Union either way. It cannot be that, even though they cannot change their mind, say halfway.
No, but indeed, we hope certainly that the UK will remain a close partner, will remain closely linked to the EU. And we have indeed a few examples which are all specific. We have Turkey, which is an applicant country which has a custom union with the EU. We have Norway, which is part of the single market and part of the free movement area called Schengen. We have Switzerland, which is not part of the single market, but part of the Schengen area. So
you have Norway, for example, that is not part of the European Union, but then you have to pay the due, and then you have to still allow that movement of people within the area, which is one of the reasons why the UK wanted out. Now, let me go back to the reaction, because the European Union and the original members, of which France and Germany, obviously, the original members, I seem to detect sort of differences in approaches, and we have the president of the European Parliament, Jean-Claude Juncker, saying, look, if you want to go out now immediately, start invoking Article 50. But then we have somebody like the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, saying, let's not pressure them. How do you see the differences in responses from all these different countries, particularly from the original members?
Well, I'm not sure that so many differences. There was a very united response the same day, Friday last week or 10 days ago, of the President of the European Council, Mr. Tusk, President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, President of the European Parliament, Mr. Schulz, and the President of the rotating presidency, the Dutch Prime Minister Rutte, which in a single statement said very clearly that the EU, rest EU 27, wanted to go ahead to continue their political journey as a group, and at the same time inviting the UK to come swiftly with the notification.
So the mood is for a swift enactment of the Article 50. Basically, that's how the
swift doesn't
European
mean hours and days, and Mr. Cameron has said clearly that he wanted, for internal reason, to wait until October. But swift,
is that feasible? Do you think 3 more months? Or?
well, legally it's certainly feasible, but as we said, also it's probably in nobody's interest to prolong this uncertainty, and certainly not in the interest, obviously, of the economic operators. And so that's why we say now there was a clear vote by the British people, which we respect, even though we are saddened by this vote, and now it's about implementing this.
Okay, well, we take a little break, Vincent, but we will continue our discussion. Setelah informasi berikut ini kita lanjutkan perbincangan masih membahas dampak Brexit bagi kelangsungan Uni Eropa. Sesaat lagi. Ya, masih dalam insight, hengkangnya Inggris dari Uni Eropa tentunya akan berdampak bagi perekonomian Uni Eropa. Dan salah satu dampaknya adalah pendapatan anggaran bagi Uni Eropa. Negara anggota Uni Eropa lain harus mengisi setidaknya setengah sejumlah kekurangan dari hilangnya kontribusi dana Inggris kepada Uni Eropa. Total kontribusi Inggris untuk anggaran Uni Eropa untuk tahun 2016 besar 19,4 miliar euro, termasuk pemotongan tarif dan pajak impor. Inggris menerima sekitar 7 miliar euro dari subsidi regional dan pertanian. Jerman sebagai negara anggota Uni Eropa terbesar disebut-sebut harus menyediakan uang tunai ekstra untuk menutupi celah ini. Institut Jerman IFO memperkirakan dana yang diperlukan mencapai 2,5 miliar euro. Ya, apa saja dampak Brexit bagi perekonomian Uni Eropa? Kita lanjutkan perbincangan. Saya ditemani oleh Duta Besar Uni Eropa untuk Indonesia, Vincent Guérin. Vincent, obviously it's not just Europe that was shocked by the historic referendum, the decision for Brexit. The rest of the world, including us here in Indonesia, we've been watching it, very fascinated, but very interested. But also the economic, the financial reaction was just very, very huge. We've seen, how the pound fell, and then the stock market, that this enormous volatility, around $2 trillion sort of disappeared on the day of the referendum. Now, economically, what does this mean for the European Union going on ahead, especially since the UK is, one of the largest and the strongest economic member of the European Union?
Well, indeed, when Britain will leave, probably will leave one day the EU now, we will lose one very important member state, strong economy, roughly a sixth or so of the European economy. But the sixth will remain, and this is 450 million inhabitants and an economy which is the largest or close to the largest in the world. And this will remain a very strong actor in international trade. And we made already the next day after the referendum very strong statements saying that we want to remain very committed on international trade. We want to pursue and conclude all the trade negotiations which we are involved in with the key partners. I think we think in particular of the transatlantic negotiation, but there are many others. And as you may know, when we come back to this, with Indonesia, we also have a very ambitious trade agenda. And so the EU will remain certainly committed to international trade, the open world. We know that our prosperity lies on openness, on the borders which are free for capital, goods, person and services. And the EU, with or without the UK, will remain one of the largest contributors of foreign direct investment and one of the largest beneficiary of foreign direct investment. And so, yes, obviously, we will be amputated, but the agenda remains the same. The agenda remains very much to reform European economy, to plug it into the kind of 3.0 agenda, and this even more so will remain on the agenda because we have lost one of our important pillars.
Yes, well, certainly a lot of changes need to be made as well. I mean, how much in terms of the contribution that will be lost, and who will make up for the loss of the UK contribution to the EU membership, which is getting becoming a very expensive membership because of, we see what's happening in Greece, and then all the southern European economies are not doing so well. So in terms of the economy, Europe is not doing very well at the moment.
Well, Europe is not really that bad, but we were badly hit certainly by the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and then with the slow recovery and the markets which had to be sanitized on the financial part. But yes, being member of the EU is indeed a financial investment because of the solidarity, which is a very strong principle in the EU, solidarity within the society and solidarity between rich and less rich member states. So once the EU will have left, the contribution of the once the UK will have left, the contribution of the UK will have to be compensated one way or the other. This will have to be discussed in this new international agreement between the EU and the UK, and we'll have to see. As you have said previously, Switzerland, Norway do contribute to the EU budget because they are linked and they benefit from certain policies on education, on research. So we'll have to discuss with the UK how they want to be part of certain things and contribute to these policies.
But do you think, in what spirit will the negotiations take place? Because obviously you don't want this Brexit will be a prelude to, for example, the Frexit, the France leaving, or the Nexit, the Netherlands leaving, and also the other exits. I mean, how much of a leeway, or how generous do you think the EU will be when it comes to negotiating with the UK over this?
Well, I don't think it's about being generous or forgiving or not generous or not forgiving. It's about having a fair and balanced agreement between the UK, which will remain a European country, which will remain very close to the EU. More than half of its trade goes to the EU or comes from the EU. And the rest of the European countries. So it has to be something which makes sense for both sides. And so I'm certainly optimistic that we will find a common ground because that's in everybody's interest.
But do you think do you think Brexit will motivate some other European countries to actually do their own referendums or start thinking about leaving?
Well, as we said, it was certainly a shock for many, but interestingly, it's also a shock for certain of the voters who voted for the exit, who suddenly realize how painful and costly this will be. So maybe this will also spark another reflection among all those who may show some sign of skepticism about the EU as it is today. And we certainly in the EU have to do our homework to look also on how to appeal again to the citizen and make this, in my view, a wonderful project of European integration being appealing again for public opinion. And so, yes, there's some homework to do. At the same time, it's very reassuring to see that in the UK, seemingly the largest part of the pro camp was among the youth.
Yes, the young people. They feel quite cheated by the whole thing.
Well,
they're used to, they've grown up in being a European as opposed to being a British. And so, yeah, this is a very interesting point, and I think this is something that we can explore in our next discussion setelah informasi berikut ini. Ya, kita akan lanjutkan sesaat lagi perbincangannya. Ya, bagaimana strategi pertahanan dan persatuan Uni Eropa pasca Brexit? Kita berbincang bersama Duta Besar Uni Eropa untuk Indonesia, Vincent Guérin. Vincent, very interesting, maybe the vote for the result of the referendum, the Brexiteers and the Remainers is actually very close, 48 for Remain and 52 for Leaving. And yet, like as you mentioned, when we look at the profile of those who actually want to remain, most of them are young people, many of them who have grown up being Europeans, being part of an integrated community where they can go wherever they want without the need for anything. They can, you know, if you're British, you can settle in France, in Germany, and you know, you're part of that community. Now, on the other hand, we've seen, for example, in Holland, you know, the rise of the right-wing movement, and we're also seeing it in France with Marine Le Pen, and we're seeing it also in Germany with the rise of the AfD, and also in Austria. So what is happening in England is actually happening all over Europe. Now, what does it say about the integrity of the European Union, and how should it go forward, and what sort of reforms that still need to be made in order to make the EU project successful for the long term?
Well, that's indeed maybe the biggest question and challenge for our political leaders, for the EU institution. Make clear that this integration project is not just for the elites, it's not just for the very long-term strategic orientation of the EU, but it's also something which is in the best interest of the man on the street throughout Europe. So that's indeed something which until, let's say, the 80s, 90s was a given fact, and all the mainstream parties would agree to this. And now this kind of consensus is somehow breaking apart in many countries. So we have to address this, certainly, and the national government, the EU institution have to address this. We, from the EU side, remain convinced that this project brings benefit to everybody. That from the young people who benefit from scholarship to study abroad, to the workers, or to the self-made man who wants to settle a company somewhere else, all these benefit from the integration. But at the same time, indeed, we're facing simultaneously huge shifts in terms of economical wealth going to Asia, also to Indonesia, in terms of security. We have now the biggest wave of migrants since World War II, with 65 million people on the roads in the world, not all of them going to the EU, but many of them aspiring to go to the EU because the EU is peaceful and prosperous. Mm-hmm. So all this all together is a huge challenge for society, because within one generation you have people who suddenly realize that the world of their parents, grandparents is just different. I wouldn't say crumbling apart, because many things are much more positive, but it's just different. And so we have to make the case very concretely that the EU is part of the solution and not part of the problem. So it's not easy, but that's, let's say, in each and every member state, in each and every election, that's what we are up to.
Now let's focus on immigration, because this is one of the reasons why many in the UK choose the Leave option, is because they feel that immigration is undermining their society, undermining their culture. So it's much more of an emotional approach to these things, and we see the impact of the movement of people, and not just especially in the UK, the people from the eastern part of Europe going to England, for example, plus compounded with the refugees and the immigrants, migrants from, say, for example, North Africa. Do you think the movement of people, which actually, you know, the basis of the European Union project, will there be some kind of reform towards it, some kind of maybe putting up barriers and so on, so that there will not be this possibility of resistance from the Europeans themselves, who perhaps feel overwhelmed by just the sheer number of foreigners coming into their land and using up their resources?
No, you're right. This issue is indeed central, because it affects both, let's say, the economy, the security, and also the demographic balance of the society, with more migrants coming into the culture also. But we have to be very clear and try to distinguish things, because they are quite distinct. You have indeed European people coming and going, as free to do in the European zone. That's one set of issues. Secondly, you have the migrants or the asylum seekers coming
from Syria, for example, in the Middle East.
Yes, in the growing numbers. And thirdly, we have, of course, something which is much more tiny but very impactful is terrorism. And now certainly with all the waves of attacks hitting the world from Istanbul to Jakarta.
And it's spooking everybody, and for obvious reasons, obviously.
So it would be certainly wrong to just mix everything. But it's true that, let's say, 50 years ago, when everything was maybe apparently clear need behind borders, we seemed maybe better protected. But the world has changed since the 50s. And so we have again to make clear that the answers to all these free movement of persons, including terrorists, require coordinated answers, coordinated replies, and not just a kind of single-handed way to reply to this one member state and a different one in another member state, because we know that all these people are moving freely from one border to the other.
But is this high on the agenda for the European Union members? Because this is one of the reasons why UK wanted to leave, is because they feel that they're not in control of their border, that they cannot control how many people they're allowed in. And to be part of the EU, you have to accept that. That's what being part of the European Union is. You accept everything that goes with the agreement.
No, absolutely. No, it's not only high on the agenda, but now it's probably the highest point on the agenda before economy or before creation of job, at least in the short term. So what we say from the European side is that we have to make sure that this area of freedom of movement is secure from the outside. And the European Commission, just a few days or weeks ago in June, has made very strong proposal in terms of creating European border and coast guard force. And this has been accepted by both Council and Parliament. And this is unprecedented. We will have now EU border guards. And this makes a lot of sense, because instead of having border guards at each and every internal border of the EU and just spreading and diluting your forces, you will have one single strong border guards at the external border of the EU. And this preserves the freedom of movement within the borders. So that's one very concrete example. Secondly, for the asylum seekers, for all the economic migrants, what we want is not to be a fortress and to be not to accept anyone left, because that's not our culture, that's not what we have signed to with the UN Convention. So we want to let them go, but in an organized way. And we are continuing to receive asylum seekers. And for the economic migrant, we have again put on the table the so-called blue card, which is not the American green card, but very similar to it, whereby we want to tell the people who have a good training, who can contribute to their background, to the economy.
There's some kind of skills that they can
Yes,
bring
do
with
come. You are welcome, but this has to be organized.
Okay. Very quickly, how optimistic are you about the survival of the European Union project itself following this Brexit?
Well, I'm 100% optimistic, not just by nature and because of my job, because really as a man, I'm a father of 4 children. I told you maybe my father's French, mother's German, my grandparents fought on each other's side, and some of my uncles were killed on the battlefields of France and Germany. This is certainly not the future we want to have for our children. And the EU integration process remains a peace process, and I think deep in their heart,
it's a peace project, isn't it?
Of course, peace and prosperity project. And deep in our heart, each and every European should remind this and should be reminded of this and should realize that we never had such a golden age in Europe since World War II, thanks to the EU.
Okay, but what language will, obviously with the UK not being there, and what language do you think will be the main language of the European Union going ahead?
Well, as you know, in the EU we are very attached, like you in Indonesia, to diversity. So we want each and every European citizen, young people, to learn at least 2, if not 3 languages. His home language, certainly 2 other languages with which he can then move around. And so Yes, of course you have world languages,
But,
the one I speak now, but you have also many other ones.
English will probably not be part of it.
Yes, it will remain certainly a very important language also on the European continent.
Okay, Vincent, thank you very much for talking to us, very enlightening. Dan kita lanjutkan perbincangan untuk mengulas lebih dalam untung rugi Brexit terhadap domestik Inggris dan juga dampaknya bagi dunia termasuk bagi Indonesia. Bersama narasumber lainnya, tetaplah bersama Insight. Ya, masih bersama Insight. Referendum memutuskan Inggris keluar dari Uni Eropa. Tapi keputusan ini kemudian menuai kontroversi. Puluhan ribu warga kota London berunjuk rasa menentang hasil referendum dan juga menuntut diadakan referendum kedua.
Pada 2 Juli 2016, ribuan pengunjuk rasa berpawai di pusat kota London untuk menentang keputusan negara meninggalkan Uni Eropa. Ini merupakan aksi yang kedua kalinya dalam satu pekan terkait hasil referendum. Sebagian besar pengunjuk rasa mengibarkan spanduk-spanduk bertuliskan slogan seperti "Saya bersama Uni Eropa" atau Brexit. Mereka meneriakkan, apa yang ingin kita lakukan adalah tinggal bersama Uni Eropa. Sekitar 4 juta orang telah menandatangani petisi menuntut diadakannya referendum kedua. Petisi diajukan di situs resmi pemerintah dan Parlemen Inggris. Jumlah itu jauh melampaui jumlah tanda tangan yang diperlukan agar sebuah petisi dibahas oleh parlemen, yaitu sekitar 100.000 tanda tangan.
A second referendum would be good, or at least a debate and a vote in Parliament.
Setelah referendum, pemerintah Inggris harus berunding dengan Uni Eropa untuk menentukan seperti apa hubungan dan kerjasama di antara keduanya kelak. Grafiardi Kresnantio, CNN Indonesia.
Ya, sejauh mana Brexit akan mengubah wajah Uni Eropa dan bagaimana pengaruhnya terhadap peta geopolitik global? Kali ini saya ditemani oleh Beginda Pakpahan, dosen ilmu hubungan internasional dari Universitas Indonesia. Halo Beginda, apa kabar? Dan dulu juga Beginda pernah tinggal di Inggris ya, mendapatkan beasiswa Chevening dan tinggal di Edinburgh. Ya, laku ini di Skotlandia ya, ini dan London. Nah, ini perlu kita ingat ya sekarang. Kalau kita bicara United Kingdom, ini kan ada Inggris, ada Skotlandia, ada Irlandia Utara. Nah, Brexit itu kebanyakan kan dipilih oleh masyarakat yang tinggal di Inggris dan Wales. Sementara orang Skotlandia, mereka rata-rata maunya remain. Begitu juga di Irlandia Utara. Beginda, bagaimana analisa Anda menurut Anda? Apa kira-kira yang akan terjadi ke depannya dengan ada Brexit ini? Dan implikasinya bukan saja terhadap Uni Eropa ya, yang tampak ketar-ketir karena ini merupakan suatu keputusan yang mengagetkan, ya belum pernah terjadi dalam sejarahnya. Tapi dampaknya terhadap dunia dari segi keamanan, dari segi perekonomian dan juga dari segi perdagangan ya kita.
Baik, yang pertama saya menghormati dulu keputusan dari rakyat UK untuk memilih misalnya leave dari Uni Eropa. Nah, dampaknya yang pertama saya lihat untuk segi ekonomi itu akan sangat besar kepada Uni Eropa dan dunia. Nah, artinya adalah kalau saya melihat ini akan memperlihatkan tadi Pak Duta Besar Uni Eropa Pak Vincent menjelaskan bahwa di situ bisa terlihat bahwa masalah kontribusi terhadap Uni Eropa siapa yang akan menutup, itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, ini akan
karena lumayan cukup besar ya,
11,3 euro billion ya, itu salah satu yang besar. Nah, ini juga akan berdampak terhadap karena situasi ekonomi Uni Eropa sendiri sedang melemah, di mana Italia stagnan, lalu Jerman hanya 1,7%, Yunani juga butuh bantuan terkait dengan euro. Nah, ini yang membuat akhirnya memberi dampak terhadap Uni Eropa. Nah, juga tadi dibahas sempat mengenai proyek regionalismenya mereka itu sendiri, karena ada semacam meningkatnya nasionalisme dan juga gerakan kanan di masing-masing negara. Nanti terjadi
contagion effect ya.
Ya, saya melihatnya itu seperti itu. Paling tidak apa yang terjadi di tuntutan dari yang partai kanan di Prancis maupun di Belanda dan juga pemungutan ulang di Austria ini menjadi semacam indikator paling tidak simptom dari itu. Nah, pertanyaannya, kemana ini ke depannya. Dan saya melihatnya ini sebagai tantangan juga sih buat Uni Eropa dan juga pelajaran bagi organisasi regional lainnya di dunia, bahwa ini akan menantang bahwa nasionalisme kembali meningkat di saat krisis politik dan ekonomi terjadi. Dan ini bagaimana ke dunianya? Kalau saya melihatnya tentu ini akan efek ke tatanan global, karena EU salah satu aktor yang boleh dibilang aktornes di politik global, dan itu juga efek tentunya karena biasanya ada UK di dalamnya untuk beraksi sebagai aktor global, seperti misalnya perjanjian dengan Iran dan lain sebagainya. Ini tentu akan sedikit ada perubahan ketika UK tidak menjadi anggota.
Tapi menurut Baginda, dengan keluarnya Inggris dari Uni Eropa, ini akan ada dampaknya terhadap security atau ketahanan Eropa itu sendiri, karena ini kan di luar dari kita masih ada NATO ya, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, di mana ya mudah-mudahan inilah bisa tetap eksis dan tetap menjadi dasar ya kekuatan pertahanan di Eropa dan di Atlantik kan.
Ya betul. Nah paling tidak Uni Eropa selalu punya tetangga yaitu Rusia, yang biasanya perlu ada keseimbangan antara dua aktor tersebut. Nah biasanya Inggris menjadi salah satu penopang dari Uni Eropa. Nah ini dengan adanya seperti ini tentu harus dicari formula antara negara-negara Uni Eropa dan Inggris, terutama Prancis dan Inggris yang mempunyai secara bilateral dalam keseimbangan untuk masalah pertahanan.
Iya, menarik karena biasanya kalau dalam konteks Uni Eropa, Inggris itu diandalkan untuk menjadi teman baiknya Amerika Serikat ya. Mereka sangat comfortable gitu, sangat dekat dengan pemerintahan Inggris. Jadi biasanya urusannya dengan ada Uni Eropa, mereka lebih gampang untuk misalnya menelpon Perdana Menteri Inggris ketimbang mereka mencari-cari mereka yang di Uni Eropa itu sendiri. Ini ada juga dari mungkin kesamaan bahasa dan juga mungkin dari sejarah Inggris kan sangat dekat dalam mendukung kebijakan-kebijakan Amerika saat ini. Nah ini bisa menjadi perubahan ya dalam konstelasi pertahanan.
Kalau saya lihat tentu pasti ada perubahan. Pastinya tentu dari hubungan ini kita bisa melihat bahwa Inggris punya hubungan dekat dengan Amerika. Dan harapan dari Amerika tadinya ya, Inggris tetap di dalam Uni Eropa, tapi kenyataannya kan malah sebaliknya. Nah tentu Amerika dan Uni Eropa perlu bekerja sama mencari formula yang terbaik supaya Inggris paling tidak secara geografis mereka tetap ada di Uni Eropa, tapi bagaimana mekanismenya, apakah nanti lewat bilateral antara UK dan EU, maupun tentu disokong oleh Amerika, atau bagaimana? Karena NATO tetap ada di Brussels, dan itu akan menjadi menarik karena apakah Inggris akan benar-benar dia akan bebas memilih nantinya tentunya hubungannya itu.
Nah, Baginda, Nicola Sturgeon, dia menteri utama ya, menteri utama lah di Skotlandia. Dia sudah mulai mengucapkan bahwa mungkin Skotlandia akan melakukan referendum kedua untuk meninggalkan UK karena mereka ingin menjadi bagian dari Uni Eropa. Nah ini kedepannya ya, persatuan yang di bawah United Kingdom ini, Inggris Raya ini, seberapa jauh akan betul-betul terancam dengan adanya Brexit?
Saya untuk melihat saat ini, saya lihat prioritas mereka lebih ke hubungan UK dan EU. Mengapa? Karena sudah pernah ada referendum sebelumnya untuk Skotlandia. Dan jika ingin melakukan referendum kedua, harus ada persetujuan di parlemen di London. Itu yang pertama. Kedua, posisi Nicola Sturgeon dengan Scottish Nationalist Party-nya, itu pada referendum pertama yang lalu itu posisinya lebih kuat dibanding yang sekarang, dengan kondisi di mana dulu cukup besar mayoritasnya di parlemen Scotland. Nah itu juga menjadi pertimbangan tentunya. Dan yang ketiga, tentu dari anggota Uni Eropa sendiri, yaitu dalam hal ini adalah Spanyol dan Prancis, cukup inginnya bernegosiasi dengan nation state, dalam hal ini adalah UK. Itu yang menyebabkan saya rasa itu masih cukup panjang, artinya diskusinya belum fokus dalam pemerintah Inggris sampai saat ini.
Iya, tapi kan salah satu kenapa waktu itu Skotlandia melakukan referendum itu mereka mempertimbangkan benefit untuk menjadi bagian dari Inggris Raya atau sendiri, ternyata menjadi Inggris Raya lebih besar ya karena lebih menguntungkan. Tapi sekarang mungkin mereka melihat bahwa benefitnya dengan meninggalkan Uni Eropa, sementara mereka ingin menjadi bagian Uni Eropa, mungkin bisa saja mereka justru tidak ingin, mereka lebih prefer menjadi bagian dari Uni Eropa ketimbang menjadi bagian dari Inggris Raya.
Nah, ini kan preference dari mereka ini kan harus dilihat dalam konteks UK ya, karena yang bernegosiasi nanti adalah UK. Kita harus melihat dulu pertama withdrawal agreements-nya antara UK dan EU seperti apa, apakah tadi sudah dibahas oleh Mbak Desi dan Duta Besar Uni Eropa, dan juga
tapi siapa tahu mereka England yang boleh meninggalkan, tapi Skotlandia boleh tetap menjadi bagian dari Uni Eropa gitu, tapi mewakili UK. Jadi Englandnya yang keluar dari Inggris Raya itu kan bisa
itu dia, Mbak.
Tergantung dengan lawyernya ya, tergantung
nanti negosiasinya tentunya, karena nanti kan kita bisa lihat ya apa yang termaktub di dalam withdrawal agreements-nya. Perihal apakah single market atau dan lain sebagainya.
Tapi yang jelas ini ribet dan akan membutuhkan waktu yang begitu
masih
panjang.
Kompleks, Mbak. Iya, dengan 3 alasan tadi plus satu lagi alasan, Mbak. Jika nanti misalnya contoh lah, memang terpisah, kan itu akan bergabung dengan euro. Apakah Scotland cukup tertarik dengan euro? Itu juga masih sebuah pertanyaan ya. Jadi saya masih melihatnya itu masih tidak menjadi faktor utama ya.
Ya, kita belum bicara mengenai Irlandia Utara yang kebanyakan juga memilih untuk tetap tinggal di European Union, apalagi Irlandia itu sendiri adalah ya mereka sudah menjadi negara Eropa kan, bagian dari Uni Eropa. Kita istirahat sebentar Baginda, tapi kita akan lanjutkan pembahasan mengenai dampak Brexit secara global sesaat lagi. Tetaplah bersama Insight. Anda masih bersama Insight, kita kembali lanjutkan pembahasan mengenai dampak Brexit atau keluarnya Inggris dari Uni Eropa. Saya ditemani oleh Baginda Pakpahan, dosen ilmu hubungan internasional dari Universitas Indonesia. Nah, kita lihat ini fenomena ini sangat menarik, apalagi salah satu yang tadi juga kita bahas dengan Duta Besar Uni Eropa adalah profil mereka yang ingin tetap menjadi bagian dari Uni Eropa itu kebanyakan anak-anak muda ya, dan sementara dan mereka tinggalnya di kota-kota besar dan sudah terbiasa lah dengan multikulturalisme, sudah terbiasa mereka kerja dimanapun dan tidak terikat dengan rasa nasionalisme mereka merasa dirinya sebagai orang Eropa. Tapi di lain pihak di bagian daerah-daerah khususnya di tempat yang mungkin dari segi ekonomi, pendidikan mereka juga agak terbelakang ya, tidak terlalu mendapatkan benefit dari Uni Eropa itu sendiri atau dari globalisasi, mereka cenderung untuk menarik diri, ingin mengembalikan semangat untuk mengkontrol negara mereka itu sendiri. Anda melihat ini fenomena ini khusus ya dalam tataran Inggris itu memang sesuatu yang sebenarnya sudah bisa diantisipasi dari dulu, tapi kenapa ya bukan menjadi PR ya bagi masyarakat atau Eropa untuk menyelesaikan atau pemerintah Inggris sendiri ya?
Jadi memang ini menjadi PR ya, baik sekarang maupun ke depan, terutama untuk program dari Uni Eropa itu sendiri. Kenapa? Karena aspirasi yang berkembang, tadi Mbak Desi menceritakan, itu yang menyebabkan, salah satu penyebab mengapa mereka menantang dalam hal ini tesis mengenai nasionalisme itu, maupun yang tadi meningkatnya gerakan kanan. Mungkin ada ketidakpuasan di sana. Nah, sekarang tergantung dari establishment-nya, para pemimpin elit baik di UK maupun juga di Eropa menurut saya, bahwa mereka harus bisa menarik ini dan mengakomodir dan melakukan reformasi, terutama di Uni Eropanya. Terutama karena memang terlalu terinstitusinya Uni Eropa, itu yang menyebabkan mereka
sangat kaku, dianggap sangat birokratis,
ya, sangat birokratis dan lain sebagainya, dan itu yang menyebabkan ini mereka tidak terdengar. Dan menurut saya nanti saya prediksi akan terjadi ada pergeseran. Dalam hal ini pergeseran antara dalam hal ini tadi Mbak Desi bilang power yang berada tadinya di institusi Uni Eropa, apakah itu akan bergeser sebagian ke kapital itu ibu kota dari masing-masing negara karena tuntutan adanya semacam democratic deficit ya di dalam Uni Eropa itu sendiri, dan bagaimana ke depannya terkait masalah politik, ekonomi dan sebagainya.
Nah, ke depannya kira-kira proyek European Union ini akan terus berlangsung begini, karena saya lihat di sini Eropa itu sendiri kan tidak, ya dari segi ekonomi itu jomplang ya, Eropa Utara dan Eropa Selatan. Kita lihat negara-negara tradisional Eropa itu sendiri, contohnya Jerman, Prancis, dan Inggris. Ya, itu mereka negara yang maju, negara yang kaya, tapi seperti Yunani, seperti Spanyol, Italia, Portugal, mereka secara ekonomi jauh lebih ya terbelakang lah. Belum lagi negara-negara ex komunis seperti Polandia, Rumania, Lituania yang banyak sekali menjadi pekerja migran di negara yang berkembang seperti Inggris. Ini merupakan proyek yang sebenarnya memiliki banyak unsur yang melemahkannya kan sebagai klub.
Saya melihatnya ini karena proyek politik, Mbak Desi, dibanding proyek ekonomi. Itu sebabnya yang menyebabkan akhirnya mereka lebih banyak tantangan yang harus dihadapi, terutama bagaimana karena Uni Eropa sendiri melakukan banyak penyeragaman dalam berbagai bidang, misalnya pemerintahan, hak asasi manusia, dan juga ekonomi yang sekarang menjadi tantangan karena mereka berencana membuat misalnya fiscal union. Itu kan bentuk federalisme yang dimana beberapa negara, contohnya seperti Inggris, itu tidak terlalu mengikuti tentang konsep ever closer union. Tadi salah satu isu yang didebatkan di dalam referendum itu adalah itu. Nah, itu yang menyebabkan karena Inggris sendiri suka yang lebih fleksibel misalnya. Dan akhirnya itu bisa kelihatan dari misalnya tidak ikutnya UK di dalam Euro maupun dalam Schengen dan lain sebagainya. Dan itu juga ada beberapa negara seperti itu di dalam EU sendiri.
Iya, memang contohnya misalnya dari segi ekonomi dan lain sebagainya, Yunani, Italia itu mereka tidak disiplin ya pengelolaan ekonominya misalnya. Nah, ini kan walaupun secara semangat ingin bersatu karena mereka semua negara Eropa, tapi secara individu negara-negara ini memiliki ciri khas masing-masing, keinginan masing-masing, budaya masing-masing, bahasa masing-masing. Jadi apa dampaknya terhadap kita Indonesia yang selama ini berurusan dengan Uni Eropa?
Kalau ke Indonesia memang tidak sebesar dampaknya misal keluarnya UK dari Uni Eropa dibandingkan dengan Uni Eropa. Mengapa? Karena yang pertama saya melihatnya adalah biasanya kita kan berurusan dengan Uni Eropa itu contohnya ya untuk tekstil misalnya Mbak Desi itu sekitar 1,2 juta untuk yang kiriman ke sana dalam bentuk dolar ya sekitar 1,8 miliar US dollar dan ke UK 600 miliar US dollar. Jadi dibandingkan 12,2 miliar untuk seluruh dunia yang kita kirimkan, misalnya tekstil dan produk tekstil, misalnya seperti itu. Yang kedua, paling nanti dampak yang kena ke kita adalah kita harus membuat 2 perjanjian yang terpisah. Karena biasanya kita misalnya bekerja sama melalui EU, karena kebijakan perdagangan Uni Eropa dalam satu, biasanya komisi yang melakukan. Nah, sekarang dengan misalnya nanti memang benar-benar nih di-invoke dan memang benar terpisah, berarti kita harus buat bilateral dengan UK.
Dan siapa tahu justru mungkin akan meningkatkan perdagangan bilateral kita dengan Inggris ya. Mereka mungkin lebih tertarik sekarang untuk melakukan
dan juga
ekspor.
Turisme misalnya, dengan pariwisata. Targetnya kan rencana 300.000 dari UK diharapkan turis ke Indonesia.
Iya, walaupun dengan pound sekarang ini saya rasa tidak banyak orang Inggris yang ingin berliburan ya, karena poundnya itu sudah turun ya 30%. Baik, terima kasih banyak Baginda atas analisanya. Dan
sama-sama Mbak Desi.
Memang hasil referendum Inggris pada tanggal 23 Juni lalu menyatakan Inggris itu keluar dari Uni Eropa setelah bergabung selama 43 tahun. Nah, keputusan ini tentunya membawa berbagai konsekuensi bagi Inggris maupun Uni Eropa. Sebagai negara dengan kekuatan ekonomi terbesar kelima, perubahan ini juga akan berdampak secara global. Di sisi lain, Indonesia sendiri telah memiliki hubungan bilateral yang cukup kuat, baik dengan Inggris maupun dengan Uni Eropa. Peluang dan tantangan tetap terbuka bagi kita di Indonesia, baik melalui kesepakatan kerjasama dan perdagangan yang baru antara Inggris maupun dengan Uni Eropa. Ya, demikian Insight kali ini. Jangan lupa saksikan kembali Insight besok bersama saya, Desi Anwar. Sampai jumpa dan bye-bye.